Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Today I wanted to talk about AK-74 magazines from my own experience, some recommendations I have, specifically from the standpoint of a defensive or a self-defensive or a home defense type of rifle, not from the standpoint of collecting magazines. So before I get into my recommendations, however, on good AK-74 magazines, I did want to mention that what may work well for me in terms of magazines may not work in your gun, or vice versa. In my case, when I first started this one of the series on my channel, AK upgrades, one of the first things I did was I changed out the pistol grip, and back then I had a Romac 992. And on that gun, a big reason why I got rid of it was it didn't work with any mags except for a extremely bubbled Circle 21 magazine that it came with, and also with Izmash True Black magazines, which are also a great mag. However, I just wanted to put that caveat in there. So a well-made AK, it will be to spec on what type of magazines it can take, but yours may not be. So just keep that in mind with some of these recommendations. But with that out of the way, let's get into it. So getting started with my actual recommendations, the absolute first choice for me that I think is a phenomenal magazine is the AK-12 magazine. Now there's a few caveats, actually a lot of caveats to be made with this one, and I made a specific video on all the features of the AK-12 mag, specifically if you want to go check that out. I did it a few months ago. But the problem with these is, one problem I mentioned in the video at that time was that these are expensive, and back then they were very expensive. Now they are dropping in price. However, the big thing I noticed is right before making this video, I was doing a little bit of research on how much has the price dropped on these, and from what I was finding from the general sellers that I go to for these types of mags, they're about 160 to 180. I got a comment recently saying that they've dropped to 120, which I haven't seen anywhere. And then the other issue is all the usual stores I normally go to are out of stock on these right now. So I'm recording this video in early-ish, but more or less mid-July. And so when you watch this, if you're watching this way in the future, maybe none of these mags will even be around by then, or maybe it'll be something totally different. But at least for right now, the AK-12 magazines are still a little bit hard to get. I would say if you have the opportunity to get one, you find them for sale for a good price, generally probably around like 180 or 160 each, then I would probably get one. At least one. Like, I think if you use this as a sort of thinking from the role, as I mentioned earlier, of like home defense, like as a primary magazine that you just have in the gun at all times, this works really, really well. But the reason I say that, in my opinion, why I think you should just get them if you have the chance, is because with all imports, whether it's a gun itself or a magazine or anything really, you never know how long they're going to be around. It's a big reason why I got this, even when prices on them were so much higher. It was, unlike what some commenters thought, it was not to flex on all of you. It was because I've always wanted to get an AK-12 mag, just because I think they look cool, but actually they are extremely well made as well. So many features on them. So since you don't really know how long they'll be around, it's better to get them, in my opinion, any import, if you can afford it, sooner rather than later when they may not be around. So definitely I would say, at least in my case, I want to get more of them, and I probably will get more of them if prices do drop. But I would say don't wait for them to drop too much, pretty much, because if you wait too long, they may not be around, even though they are still new production magazines. Some of you may disagree with me on that point, and that is totally fine. Just don't spurg out about it, as some people have. But anyway, moving on, the next magazine. So, as I said, this is like by far what I would say is the top choice. This works phenomenally well, but things may change. Right now, I can't actually find these anywhere. So what I would recommend as a runner-up or a second choice, and these are actually tied. I would say if you can get your hands on a Plum magazine or a True Black Izmash magazine, or pretty much any of the old Bakelights. Now, there's a few things I do want to mention about Bakelights specifically, but if you can get any of those magazines, they all work phenomenally well. And the only real downside I could say compared to the AK-12 mags, a lot of them are kind of minor, but the big one is just like these don't have windows, and I think windows are a huge help, which I'll kind of talk about that more later. But what I wanted to mention specifically about Bakelights, and why I would say to maybe kind of avoid them a bit, is because while they are great, like I was saying earlier, this is from more of like a defensive, like self-defense standpoint, they are really bright orange. Now granted, they're not like blaze orange, they're more of like a brownish orange, but still they're a pretty bright color. They're pretty easy to see. So if you're worried about exposing your position, which I don't know how much that would apply in home defense, you can be the judge of that, but they are bright orange. And the other bigger reason is they are very expensive for what they are. They're just a standard mag like this, except, you know, brownish orange, Bakelite color. But the thing about them is they have a lot of collector value to them now. I have not seen them for under 100 in about a year now. I kind of wish I bought one when I had the opportunity to, but it's like I was saying earlier with the AK-12 mags, if you can afford them, just get them when you can. But anyway, yeah, that's why I wouldn't recommend the Bakelites. It's just, I think they're much more expensive than they should be because of that collector's value. Next magazine I would recommend is the Circle 10 magazines or the Circle 21s. I don't have any of the Circle 21s on hand, and for some of you, kind of like what I was mentioning earlier with some of the AKs being in spec and some not being in spec for their magazine wells, this is one that I actually have trouble with loading into my AK personally. Now it does go in and everything is fine on that, but it's a very as you can see there, I wasn't actually trying to exaggerate that either. Something with the catch on this specific magazine, but maybe it's just the dimensions of the Circle 21 magazines in general, it is kind of hard to insert into the gun. Now, if you just have it for home defense and you just always have it in the gun anyway, then you won't have that issue. But it's just kind of awkward. For me, I always have to, on this gun, line it up perfectly in the front to get it in, whereas with all these other mags I was mentioning, they just go straight in. You know, the plum mags just go straight in. Granted, these are also a little bit on the tight side, but they're really, really good. And the true black as well just goes perfectly in. So since when you're reloading it might matter and you don't want to really fumble with it, you know, you want to be as quick as possible, I could definitely see why you wouldn't want to fumble with your magazine. So that's my reason why I would say the Circle 10s are a little bit behind the Izmash and the other Russian magazines, the Bakelites and all that. Oh, and I did say Russian, but all of the Bakelites are really good. East German, any country they're from, pretty much, they're all super, super well made and they'll work flawlessly. Then the last magazine I would recommend is just these modern production Bulgarian, just commercial as they're called, magazines. They work quite well. However, one note on these is, so these are about like $15 to $20-ish depending on where you buy them from, so very, very affordable. And they are reinforced. They do have a non-reinforced version, which I would recommend to stay away from. But the reinforced version has steel feed lips, it has a steel catch, and it has steel reinforcement on the front. However, the steel reinforcement on the front only goes to about here, about maybe about a third to about a fourth of the way down. Whereas on all the rest of these magazines, whether it's the AK-12 mags, the Izmash, truly all of them normally go to about halfway, again approximately halfway down the magazine. It always helps to have it more reinforced and it really doesn't add that much more weight to it. So that's just something to keep in mind. But as far as availability goes, these commercial Bulgarian ones are just super, super easy to get. You can pretty much get them anywhere. I bought a ton of them on Gun Mag Warehouse, so yeah, you can really find these anywhere, and they work great. I did hear one person mention that they had these deform in a magazine pouch before, so I haven't had any issues myself, and I've been using a lot of these, but I would keep that in mind, you know. Pretty anecdotal, but just, you know. So that covers it for all the magazines I would personally recommend in the AK-74. However, I didn't want to end the video right there. The other thing I wanted to mention is magazines that I would not recommend, and I actually don't have any of these on hand, either because I've avoided them because other people said they're absolute garbage, or because they've actually broken on me and I've just tossed them in the trash. The first of which is pretty much any Tapco mag. They're just complete garbage, like just don't even waste your time with them. Even as a range mag, I've had nothing but failures with Tapco magazines, failures to feed. So unless you want to practice malfunction clearing all day, I would absolutely stay away from those. Another one that's pretty much the exact same in terms of unreliability is the Pro mags. I haven't had very good luck with them. And then the last one I would not recommend is actually the Magpul P mags. Now I know they make, and in my experience, they do make very, very good AR magazines, but I think what I've heard recently is that they have improved their design on the AK ammo on the 7.62 by 39 magazines, but they have not done anything to improve the AK-74 magazines, as far as I'm aware. But I've heard so many issues with the feed lips on the Magpul mags cracking, and they're not reinforced at all, or at least not that I know of. So, although they may work well for ARs, they do not work well in my experience, and from what I've heard, in AKs. Also, like I was saying earlier, like I can already tell there's going to be someone eventually. So in before the dude in the comments who types in that they work great for him and he's never had any issues. Okay. Some people don't. And like I was saying earlier, some AK's magazine wells are just slightly different to where they will work better. But in my experience, I would not trust any of those mags that I just mentioned for a defensive role whatsoever. Just spend a little bit more money and you could get a Circle 10, and those work great. You know, as I was mentioning earlier, I have a little bit of issues with inserting them, but they're pretty easy to find. Or hell, even just get the Bulgarian commercial ones. Are about the same price as those P mags, and or actually I think all of those mags I just mentioned are about the same price. But yeah, these Bulgarian commercial ones work phenomenally, light years better than the rest of those I just mentioned. So really don't waste your money with those. Now I just wanted to end off just talking about a few more things. So I was mentioning it earlier, and I'm going to get to it now, is windowed mags. It is very useful to be able to see how much ammo you have at a glance, especially on this AK-12 magazine. I can just look down like this because it has a glow-in-the-dark follower, even if it is pitch black, and I can see, based on kind of the follower's position, how much ammo I have left, which is great. And there are other windowed magazines out there, one of which isn't really windowed, it's just a clear magazine. And that is the Polish V Project mag. This is, so not a very good mag. I bought it because I wanted to try it out because it's translucent, and that's really nice to be able to see your round count. Doesn't have a glow-in-the-dark follower or anything like that. It's just a standard AK-74 magazine, but clear. Well, I say standard, but it doesn't actually have any steel reinforcement anywhere. I have, however, had a few issues with this magazine with feeding. It seems like it might be a little bit temperature sensitive, so maybe the materials warp a bit. I noticed when I shoot this, if I remember right, it was in the summer last time I actually used this, and I had a bunch of failures to feed, whereas when I shoot this in the winter, I don't have any issues. So I don't know. I don't notice any visible warping on it, but it very well might be the case. So, and also, you know, this just doesn't have any steel reinforcement, so I really wouldn't trust it too much. They're about the same price as the Bulgarian commercial ones, as I was mentioning earlier, so I would still just go with those. But, you know, if you do want to get a windowed mag, another option is, another one that I did want to mention, although I wouldn't recommend them either, is AC Unity magazines. They're kind of similar in their window design to, like, I don't know, I would say mostly like one of the Gen 3 P mags for the ARs. But the problem with those AC Unities is they don't have any reinforcement either. I don't even think they're steel. I don't think they have steel feed lips on those either, if I remember right from what other people have said. I was thinking about buying one at one point, but yeah, when it doesn't have the reinforcement, you know, for a defensive magazine, I would not trust it. But the last thing you could do is, for windowed mags that actually works well if you can't get a AK-12 mag, or you don't want to risk it with those other magazines, is you could just take any standard magazine like this, and you could just cut windows into it. Now that does potentially open up literal holes for dirt, debris, and all of that to get into. How big of an issue that is really depends on you. If you're always shooting in environments where it's not that dusty, then it'll probably work fine. But in my case, I did cut holes in one of my Stanags for the AR-15, but I never did it for the AK, and I'm probably never going to, just because I don't want to take that risk with getting a bunch of dirt into the magazine. So that concludes my video on recommendations I would have for AK-74 magazines. Hopefully you found this useful. If nothing else, even if none of these recommendations work well for you, I would just say look for one that has, at the least, steel feed lips and a steel catch here in the back. In my experience, the ones with a polymer catch always end up really getting just pretty much rubbed off and gone, cracking off, stuff like that. So let me know if you have any other questions in the comments. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.